Okay, once again, a very warm welcome to everybody joining this session, Zerto's webinar around continuous backup today. My name is Gijsbert Jansen van Doorn. I'm the Director Technical Marketing at Zerto, and today is a very exciting time for me because I'm going to be doing a live demo, which is always a very nerve-wracking moment when doing webinars, but I'll promise you I'll do my very best to make it as exciting and as great as possible. So today I'm going to talk about Zerto's capabilities with regards to continuous backup. And for those of you familiar with Zerto, you might have attended our October webinar, our October launch webinar, where we released Zerto Data Protection and many other features that were part of Zerto 8.5, but we released them in October. As many of you know, we have many capabilities in our platform, and we've been delivering these capabilities using our Enterprise Cloud Edition license. And Enterprise Cloud Edition basically includes everything, every single capability we have available in our platform. That means disaster recovery, that means migration and mobility, that means a local continuous backup, that means long-term retention across all these different platforms that we support. But many of our customers were asking us for a more flexible way of licensing Zerto and using our platform, using our continuous data protection engine for other use cases as well, to not only protect their mission critical applications, but basically take that continuous data protection capabilities and bring them to all other applications they have available in their data center as well, making sure they're protected the Zerto way. And that's why we released Zerto Data Protection. And Zerto Data Protection really focuses on protecting all of your other applications, all of your other lower tier applications using Zerto's continuous data protection engine. So what does that mean? What does Zerto's continuous data protection engine mean for you as in solving for your backup requirements? Well, one, it includes local continuous backup, and local continuous backup allows you to achieve an RPO of seconds regardless of what type of application you are protecting. So using our virtual replication appliances, using our continuous data replication. And we combine that local continuous backup with long-term retention into the cloud or to an on-prem NAS appliance, all protecting those applications without any performance impact. So without any impact to your production performance. And this has been a TCO-driven decision as well, because using our software-only scale-out architecture, scaling actually at the front end of the application, we don't require any additional compute. We don't require any dedicated servers, dedicated appliances, because we solve everything using our scale-out architecture, using our virtual replication appliances, and solving everything within our single, simple, scalable platform. So what does Zerto Data Protection include? And I'd like to mention that Zerto Data Protection and ECE, our Enterprise Cloud Edition, are licenses that can be mixed and matched within one environment. So I could have 200 VMs being protected by an ECE license and 600 VMs being protected by a Zerto Data Protection license. And Zerto Data Protection includes our continuous backup capabilities using our journal. They include capabilities to instantly restore from that local journal. It involves application consistent recovery using our application consistency grouping. It allows you to set those short-term SLA policy settings for the journal, for the short-term retention. It allows you to set long-term retention policies, offloading that data for many, many years to more cost-effective storage, be it on premises or in the cloud. It supports those long-term retention targets, being cloud, disk, or object. It has built-in intelligent index and search, allowing you to find the data that you stored on your long-term retention repositories, making sure that it's available for recovery. It also has all the data protection workflows built in that allow you to recover that data, whether it's from your journal or your long-term retention repository. So I'm going to dig into some of these capabilities and some of these features within our product. Again, ECE has all of this available, but also includes remote replication for DR purposes, DR workflows, failover tests, replication to the cloud. So it's a much broader license, but Zerto Data Protection is really focused around solving for those continuous backup use cases. So how does that work? What does that mean, continuous backup? Continuous backup basically uses our very well-known journaling capabilities. Instead of taking a snapshot of a VM, storing it on secondary storage somewhere, we'll be able to use our journaling technology, be able to use our continuous data replication to continuously back up your applications onto a local copy. This local copy is both a replica disk, but also a journal, allowing you to really have a granular recovery from that journal. Now, of course, the journal is limited with a retention of 30 days, but combining that with long-term retention to native public cloud targets or to on-premises, more cost-effective NAS appliances allow you to take that copy from that journal and store it on cost-effective secondary storage. For compliance needs, for that basically second line of defense, because your journal is that first line of defense. This allows you to really granular recovery, seconds of granularity. This allows you to really quickly recover because the journal is stored on production grade storage. And it's all being protected with that same engine that has made Zerto the DR application of choice for large enterprises. Now, of course, the long-term retention targets are really important. And what Zerto allows you to do with those long-term retention targets is basically store data for any amount of time. And if you need to store data for a longer amount of time, you want to use more cost-effective storage. So what Zerto has actually added to its 8.5 product is the support for LTR to cloud targets, whether it's Microsoft Azure Storage Blobs or AWS S3. And that's actually an additional feature to what we already supported, which is long-term retention to disk. And those disks could be anything NAS, so SMB and NFS protocol, could be a purpose-built backup appliance. We have built-in native support for HPE Store 1s and its Catalyst API. We support data domain and Exagrid. So maybe you already have one of those appliances running. You can now start using that for long-term retention with Zerto. So providing local continuous backup in the front end and long-term retention in the back end using your existing appliances. Now, next up is support for S3 compliant targets as well. And by doing that, we will also support things like Google Cloud Storage as well. As soon as you start storing data for a longer amount of time on long-term retention targets, it's really important that you have the ability to find the data you're looking for. And that's why we've built in intelligent index and search into this as well. Intelligent index and search basically allows you to select the VMs that you want to index. We'll index those virtual machines as soon as we protect them onto a long-term retention target, and you can search across those different points in time. We're using actually an unstructured and scalable way to do that. So even though we've added this capability to our platform, we have no added components. So there's no additional database service required. There's no additional compute required. It's all solved within our existing scalable architecture. And another thing is, as soon as you start storing it, you want to control the retention of that data in the cloud as well, that data on those long-term retention targets as well. So that's why we've added retention policies to basically comply with those grandfather, father, son type of schemes, the daily incrementals, the weekly fulls, the monthly fulls, or yearly fulls. So we allow you to set that in a really granular way as well. And another thing that's really important is that no matter where you protect your applications, whether it's for short-term or long-term, we'll still be able to provide you with that application consistency grouping that you're used to from Zerto. So Zerto protects your applications as one entity, as one logical container, and that allows you to also recover that application to one single point in time. This means that if my application consists of multiple database servers, whether it's Oracle, SQL, or MongoDB, or even a combination of all of them, Zerto will be able to help you recover to all those different components of that application to the exact same point in time. So this allows you to really protect entire applications instead of single components of applications. And that consistency is maintained whether you're recovering it from a few seconds ago or from years ago from a long-term retention target. Now, in Zerto 8.5, which actually got released a couple of weeks ago, we've added new backup capabilities. And like I said before, we've added backup to AWS and Azure. We've added the capability to instantly recover files and folders back to the production systems. So instead of downloading them first, you can now directly recover them back to its original source host. We've added role-based access control components, making sure you have segregation of management for those backup type of roles. We've added capacity management. We've added things like long-term retention, compression, making sure that we save you on bandwidth and on storage cost in the cloud. And of course, we've added audit trail logging, which is really important once you start recovering files. Auditing, security, compliance is very important once you start backing up data using Zerto. Well, let's zoom into those public cloud targets real quickly. We're using the native way to store data into the cloud. So we're using Azure Blob as a target, and we support AWS S3 storage as a target. And within those offerings, we support the different tiers as well. So we support infrequent access in AWS S3. We support hot and cool tiers within Azure Blob storage. And we support all the different Azure and AWS environments, including the government ones as well. We allow you to restore the data that's stored on those targets to your on-prem environment. Of course, we use the built-in and secure authentication methods that are delivered by Azure and AWS, so it's fully integrated. And we also make sure that the data is encrypted both in flight and as well as support for encryption at rest on the cloud target as well. So that's all delivered while supporting those different environments. Now, another thing is that what we added is instant restore to production for files and folders. Now, we've already supported file and folder recovery for a while, ever since Zerto 4.5, but with this, we made it just that little bit easier. Instead of you having to download the file first, we now directly recover those files or folders back to its target or its source virtual machine. And I'll actually show that in the demo next up. So we're taking those files and folders from the journal, restoring it directly back to its source. Again, with delivering the same granularity that you're used to from our journal. So 5-second granularities, whether a file is created an hour ago, deleted 5 seconds ago, it's already recoverable using our file and folder restores. Of course, there's more things we've added. I already mentioned data compression. I've already mentioned audit trail logging. I already mentioned the backup roles, but the backup role is really important if you have a dedicated backup team that you need to manage Zerto. So you can now create a specific role for them so they can only do those backup specific operations. Now, what we talked about during our October launch is it's a new world right now. A new world requires new backup. It requires no more data loss. It requires fast recovery, and it requires a scalable and scale-out way to protect your applications. So next up, I don't want to bore you with any more PowerPoint slides. I want to dig into the live demo. So I want to show you how it works in Zerto right now. And I'll also quickly be showing you some of the capabilities or new features that we're working on right now and will deliver in the future that would even make it more easy to use Zerto and strengthen our position in the backup market. So please bear with me as I quickly switch to a different screen and show you the live demo. Like I said, small disclaimer, this is an actual live demo, so I'm hopefully the demo gods are with me and will not fail on me. Now, a little housekeeping. If you have any questions, don't hesitate to ask. We have the question panel up and running in GoToWebinar. Please use it, because at the end of the session, I will use my time to actually answer those questions while I'm logging into my ZVM for the demo. So please ask away. Doesn't necessarily have to be about our continuous backup offering, but of course, it does allow me to show it to you directly. Okay, so I've got my environment up and running. I'm going to start sharing my screen. Okay, there we go. Yes, if everything worked fine in this wonderful GoToWebinar, I am now sharing my ZVM screen, and let me quickly guide you through my setup. Now, I'm running Zerto. I'm running it between two different sites. I've got a couple of ESXi hosts running, and I'm protecting a couple of applications. Now, if you go to sites, you can see I'm replicating from my Boston site to my Arnhem site, and Arnhem is actually my hometown. I'm based out of the Netherlands, and I'm protecting a couple of applications. And I'm protecting applications both remotely, so I'm replicating applications going from the Boston environment to Arnhem, but I'm also replicating certain applications locally. And that's for my backup use case. So as you can see, I've named them ERP application local backup, Windows file server 01 local backup, and I've got a couple of applications going to my remote site as well, enabling them to be filled over to that other site. Now, the first thing I'm going to do is quickly guide you through the setup of a virtual protection group and how do I set it up to be replicated locally. How do I set up the long-term retention policies to make sure to ensure that it's now ready for that local continuous backup use case. So I'm going to create a new VPG. I am going to call it. So let me quickly see what is the application I'm not protecting locally yet. It's CRM application. So I'm going to do CRM application local backup. Very important application for me, so I'm going to give it a high priority. Click next. Going to select the VMs that I want to protect. My CRM application consists of 2 VMs. I'm going to add them to my local protection group. This is where I can give it a target. So I don't want it to be recovered remotely. I want to protect it locally, so using a local journal. So I'm going to use my Boston site, which is local to me. I'm going to protect it using our cluster. I've got a target data store, and this is where I can set those SLA settings for a journal. So this is really all about, okay, so my first line of defense, where do I want to recover my data from? And how long would it be? What's the retention need to be? Now, typically when you recover, for example, files, you recover them within the first 48 hours. Now, just to be safe, I'm going to store 7 days of changes on my local environment, making sure that I can recover files with seconds granularity up to 7 days ago. Now, I'm not gonna use a test reminder right here. So now I'm going to have a target RPO of 5 minutes. Now, imagine doing a backup every 5 minutes. We're actually doing it every 5 seconds and storing your data in the journal. I'm going to skip this setting. I'm going to select the networks that I can recover the VMs in. Going to click next. I'm not going to change my IP addresses on recovery right now. I don't really need that for local backup because that's a different use case. What I am going to do is I am going to keep a long-term retention copy because I've got local tax laws that state I have to store my data for 7 years. I have to keep it for 7 years. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to set up long-term retention. And it's as easy as turning it on, selecting the target repository. So I'm going to, I actually have two different types set up. I've got an Azure storage blob configured. So an Azure storage account where I can replicate it to using cold storage. I also have a local SMB target. I'm actually going to use the local SMB target right now. I can also enable file system indexing right here. If these VMs are, for example, file servers, I could actually index the file system, make it searchable, so it's really easy for me to locate those files I want to recover and need to recover. Now, we talked about compression and how we added compression to Zerto 8.5. This is where I can set up the different levels of compression. We've got optimal, we've got high, which is the most from a consumption or space saving capacity wise, it's the best one. Optimal balances between CPU usage and the actual compression ratio, and none is, of course, I can also disable it. Let's say my target actually supports better compression. Let's leave it up to that target. I'm going to leave it at optimal right now. If I put it in high, you could expect to see a data reduction of about 50%, which is actually pretty awesome. Let's set it on high for this one. And now this is where I can set my retention policy as well. So I'm going to take a daily copy. Let's say something happens to my journal. I always have this copy on a different type of storage available to recover from. I'm going to do monthlies, and let's say I'm going to do yearlies as well, and I want to make sure that I keep those yearlies for 7 years because that's my compliance. That's what I need to do for my tax laws. I click next, and basically that's all I need to do. So I've now configured this application to be protected locally. I've added a long-term retention policy, and as soon as I click done, everything will run automatically. It will create that application, it will start the replication locally, that will be fairly quickly, and it will then start doing those long-term retention copies at the scheduled time. Now, of course, I've already set up a couple of applications, so let's start with showing you the file recovery back to the production system. Now, with Zerto 8, we've released a basically a little tweak to our user interface. Now, if you look at the bottom left side, we have 3 options. We have failover, which you use for like more disaster recovery scenarios. We've got restore, which are more focused towards the backup use case of it. And we have a move, which is more focused towards data mobility and migrations. Now, of course, I want to restore files, so I'm going to restore, and I'm going to click File. As easy as that. Now, I've got my Windows file server 01 running right here. I'm going to recover a file from that file server. I'm going to click Next. I'm going to scroll through my list of points in time, and I'm going to pick one. I'll just pick a random one. I actually have 1,624 to pick from, so that's quite the list. So you can see how granular we get. I click Start Mount, and what happens right now is on the background, we'll actually start mounting that virtual machine, allowing us to browse that file system and simply select files and recover them. I would say it's done mounting. There we go. It's done mounting, and this will allow me to browse that file system. I click Next, and I can simply browse the file system. Now, I've got some files right here in my marketing folder, which are, of course, extremely important. And I'm going to actually recover the best practices Zerto in high availability PDF file. We're going to click Next, and now there's 2 options. One, I can download the file. Download it on my own local system, email it to the user, copy it to a different server. I can do multiple things with it. But if I want to do it quickly, I'll just simply recover it back to its original location or back to its original server. So what happens is I choose the credentials I want to use to recover it. So I've got the credentials set up, and I'll actually show you where you can set those up in a minute from now. And I will use these Windows admin account credentials to authenticate with the server and restore the file. So now I simply click restore, and what will happen is the file will be restored to its source location. So I'll actually show you. So let me quickly log into the file server. As it happened to be, I'm actually logged into the file server right now. And as you can see, there's a folder right here. And yes, this is my local time, z_restored, and this will contain that restored file. So the file is back to how it was a few minutes ago. Now, to show you the power of continuous backup, I am going to create a small text document. It's quite literally a small text document. I'm going to add some text to it. And I'm going to save it. Now, as you can see, I created this file at 5:29 p.m. my local time. And well, let's see, it's 29 for a couple more seconds. Let's quickly go through. Let's wait a few more seconds. What I'm actually going to do now is I am going to delete the file. So I've deleted the file from my system. Created a couple, like less than a minute ago, and deleted it already. So let's take a look at our interface again. Let's stop this mount, and let's see if I can recover that file actually, to really show you the power of this. Let's go to the Windows file server. Now, the challenging part right now is I need to find that point in time it was still there. Let's try this one. Let's start that mount, and let's see if we can recover that file. Again, I created that file about a minute ago, 2 minutes ago, deleted it a few seconds ago. I have to wait for the mount, there we go, to appear. This is a challenging one. I didn't actually test this one, so let's see if this actually works. We go to shares, marketing, because that's where I create the text file. Let's see if we can find, and there we go, small text document. Restore it. I'm gonna go back to that VM. Just initiated another restore. Have to wait a few minutes, a few moments. And as soon as it's done, there's my text document. Very easy example right now, but again, I created it 2 minutes ago, 2.5 minutes ago, deleted it 20 seconds after I created it, and I can already recover it. So this is the power of continuous backup. Now, of course, I mentioned index and search. So let me quickly guide you through how index and search works. So again, it's a more restore backup type of use case. So I'll simply go to restore, search and restore, search within the VM, and I'll, actually I can show you we support both Linux and Windows file systems. So this is Linux. As you can see, next for volume, I can search across these and I can recover these files. But I also have a Windows file system available where I can simply recover Windows files from a Windows file system. So I can go to any type of file. Well, let's do a different one. Let's find a PDF file. Should have multiple available there. Just use this one to start. Now there's a few things I can do here because I can download this one directly from the journal because this one is still available in the journal. But if it wasn't available in the journal, I could actually restore the VM from long-term retention that contains that file and recover it that way. Again, that's typically a last resort because that's past the 30 days of journal that I could have. But it gives you really powerful overview of where my files are and which different points in time are they. I can download them directly from the journal. I can recover the VM. I could even recover the entire virtual protection group or application that was part of. So it gives you multiple ways of recovering the entities you need to recover, and of course locate the files that you want to recover, or even folders you want to recover. Now, I told you a little bit about long-term retention. I talked a little bit about how you can restore files directly to a VM, and I've showed you that we use credentials for that. Now, Zerto has released in Zerto 8.0 the application consistent, or actually application aware long-term retention copies. And what it does, it can use VSS to create a like a database consistent copy of SQL and use that point in time to copy it to long-term retention. But we need to use guest credentials for that to be able to support that. Now, we're using that same feature, that same capability to also store the guest services credentials that we use for recovering files back to its production system. So this is a secure way, they're stored encrypted in a database. It's a secure way to add different credentials that you use to recover to different servers to Zerto and use that to recover to the original source, to the source VM. Now, like I said, we also added support for Azure and AWS cloud native targets for long-term retention to Zerto 8.5. And I actually have a Microsoft Azure storage account connected to this environment as well. So I can back up both VMs and VPGs to a local network share I have right here as the Azure long-term retention repository as well. And the way I recover from those long-term retention repositories is fairly easy, because again, I go to this restore part of Zerto, of the ZVM interface. I select VM or VPG. I want to restore a VM or VPG. I select the VM I want to restore. For example, WinFS 01. I click next. I select what point in time. My long-term retention runs daily. I've got this configured since 2 days ago, so I've got 3 copies. I can choose any of these copies and simply restore the VM back to my production site. Now, to show you that we support both the SMB target as the Azure target, I simply go to this one, stored on my Azure repository, click next, select a VM, click next, and restore it back to its data store, at least the data store you want it stored to. It's as easy as that. Now, I'm not going to run you through an entire restore. That's pretty boring because we now have to wait and then start a VM. You've probably seen this happen all the time, but it makes it really easy. Just use one platform. Use Zerto to protect it both locally using the journal and give you recovery granularity of seconds, and include the more cost-efficient long-term retention as like a second line of defense, and for those compliance use cases as well. If I want to monitor how my long-term retention is doing, I simply go to long-term retention and it will show me exactly how my applications have, how my long-term retention jobs have been running. I've got a success rate of 100% for this one because I've done 2 copies and 1 manual one. I can go into that VPG directly and start all my actions from there as well. Another thing that we've added to Zerto is the ability to manage those different retention sets. So let's say I've done 3 manual copies to the Azure retention, or to my backup repository, and I want to delete 2 of them because I don't need them. That's a waste of space. I simply go into my VPG or go to my long-term retention environment, click Manage Retention Sets. I can actually delete those retention sets from my repository. So I can manage those different copies on my on my long-term retention targets as well, saving you from space, making sure that you can manage that capacity a little bit better. Now, I see a lot of questions pop up in the chat box, so I want to make sure that I start answering those questions as well, because this was my overview of Zerto and the continuous backup and how we use our journal locally to protect you, to solve that backup use case for you. So I'm going to quickly go back to my slide deck, talk a little bit about what we're working on right now, and then start answering those questions for you. So bear with me while I'm quickly switching to my my presentation again, because hey, the live demo went really well. At least I seem to think so. It's no errors, which is always good. So let me quickly share my screen. There you go. And this is where where we conclude the live demo and start going into the long-term the future of Zerto's data protection, because we're not going to stop where we are right now. We're definitely going to develop more and make sure that we really solidify that use case and make sure we deliver that best experience to our customers. And here are some of the things that we're working on right now. One of them is we're working on a simplified way of configuring and managing your protection groups. So we're going to deliver on a specific protection group with a simplified setup where you don't have a lot of options. We make a lot of choices for you to make it really easy to set up that protection group for the backup, the continuous backup use case. We're going to support immutability for those cloud targets. We're going to support the different tiering options in cloud targets, going from Azure of AWS S3 into Glacier, for example, or going from Azure's blob storage into Azure Archive. We're going to support file and folder restores directly from those long-term retention targets. And another cool feature that we're working on is instant VM restore. So instead of doing a live failover, no, we'll actually give you a restore capability that will instantly spin up a VM completely independent from Zerto, while still maintaining protection of all the other VMs that you can use to restore from that local journal. So that's different than a failover. It's an instant VM restore. And that's actually something I am personally really looking forward to. Of course, there's more and more that we're working on, but these are some of the things that we're working on right now related to those backup use cases. I'm pretty excited about most of those. We're going to have some really cool features coming up. And that basically concludes my session for today from a PowerPoint and live demo perspective. So I want to switch to questions. I want to make sure that I answer those questions that we have in the chat box available right now. So I'm going to switch to the question panel and start answering some questions. Now, of course, number one question you get is, or we get is this going to be shared? Is this recorded? Absolutely. This is available on demand afterwards as well. And we have the slides available for download at that point as well. I see someone saying hello from Denver, hello from Arnhem, the Netherlands. The pricing model, first question, of course, we've got our Enterprise Cloud Edition. We have our Zerto data protection available, and that's priced at a different point. So it's priced at a backup price point. So I'm going to forward you to the right person. I see that my wonderful colleague has responded as well, and we'll be able to get back to you on that one. Now, another question is, and that's a great question, is how would I perform a DR exercise without affecting production systems, along with continuous backup used for disaster recovery? Now, with Zerto, there's a built-in workflow with Zerto and our Enterprise Cloud Edition, which is called failover test. And failover test allows you to actually spin up those VMs that you are replicating to any point in time in an isolated environment without using, without impacting the production environment. So you can do it at any time of the day, spin up those machines and test your DR. I hope that answers your question. Now, another question is IBM COS also supported? I'm personally not familiar with IBM COS, so I won't be able to answer that one. If you can give me some more details around it, I'll happily answer it for you. Another question is Zerto 8.5 available for Azure? Absolutely. We released Zerto 8.5 a couple of weeks ago, I think a little more over a month ago, and it's available for Azure as well. So you can start using 8.5 and its features for Azure as well. Now there's a very interesting question about our recommendations for networking, failing over from one data center to the other data center. So the question is, what is our recommendation when it comes to keeping subnets from one data center to another when failing over? In other words, have you seen customers keep the same /24 network going from one data center to the other? We've basically seen it all. We've got over 8,000 customers, and we support any of it because we're completely transparent from a network perspective. So you could have the same subnet, we can change the IP address for you. We can bring it up in a different network on a cloud target or in a different hypervisor. So we're flexible to that. To me, I always say personally, I prefer not changing anything, keeping the same IP address, because that eliminates risk. That makes it easier, it makes it more transparent. So we can do both. We support both. We support the re-IP process as well. So we're flexible. I'd say, especially when you're looking at a DR scenario, I would like to limit risk, and as soon as I change more, I add more risk. So I hope that kind of answers your question. Now another question I'm getting is, we already have our license, but that doesn't include the wider scoped Zerto data protection features. Well, it depends a little bit on what type of Zerto license you have right now, but I would definitely reach out to your local account team and talk to them about what's available and what's not available. Another question, and I'm getting this question a lot, is around the support for data domain and specifically DD Boost. We don't have any built-in integration with data domain. So we support data domain as a target, but we don't have any DD Boost support. Now, one of the benefits of DD Boost, and a part of the reason why DD Boost has been developed, is to make sure that it doesn't impact, has a lot of impact on network, to do like source side dedupe and things like that. But because Zerto is taking the long-term retention copy not from a production VM, but from its replica and its journal, it's not impacting production in a great way. So it's less important to us. We don't necessarily need to eliminate all those things. We use a different way of taking those copies and storing them in a long-term retention target. So I hope that kind of answers your question. Another question we get is, does Zerto allow for SQL protection? For instance, being able to restore a SQL databases to a to a SQL granular restore. I think probably meaning, can you restore SQL databases? I always like to say that Zerto supports the protection of any protection and recovery of any type of application, because we protect it at a VM level, and we maintain write order fidelity, so we can always get it back to a consistent state. If you really want to, for example, recover different objects from a SQL database, you could simply start that SQL database in an isolated bubble, connect to it, and export it using the built-in tools. And that way, simply import it again in the production database. Now, sit tight, because we're definitely working on different ways to support this in a more granular and maybe somewhat user-friendly manner, but that's something that's on our roadmap right now. Another question is long-term retention. If the VPG is removed, how do I recover the VM or a file? So long-term retention, the copies on long-term retention, of course, are stored even when your virtual protection group is removed. As long as the retention policy hasn't expired yet, you could still recover those entities from the long-term retention targets. Another question is, are your backups and long-term storage immutable? You could configure that more on the target side. Like I said, we are working on support for immutability for cloud targets. So can I do a restore to Azure? If you replicate to Azure, we can recover in Azure. The next step for us is to actually allow direct restores to Azure from long-term retention. Now, there's a lot of other questions out there. I see my IBM COS cloud object storage. Not yet. We are definitely working on supporting IBM cloud object storage as well, using the S3 compliant way. So I think that's that was the question, and yes, we're definitely working on that. It's on our roadmap. I think it's more of a making sure that we support the S3 compliant API completely, some Q&A, and then we can support it. Now, there's a lot of other questions out there. Unfortunately, I don't have time in this session right now to answer them. I'm running out of time, but I'd like to thank you very much for your attention. We have a list of the questions. We have a list of your contact details, so we'll be reaching out to you to answer those questions. Thank you very much for your attention. Thank you very much for joining me. I hope this was useful for you. I hope you enjoyed it. I know I did. And please join us for any of our next webinars. Thank you and have a wonderful day.